Have you ever had a feeling so strong, so certain, that it felt more real than what your own eyes were showing you? We're taught to trust our five senses as the ultimate arbiters of reality. But I'm holding proof, right here in my hands, that the United States government spent over $20 million, across 2 decades, to prove that our most profound and accurate sense is one we were systematically told does not exist. If you've ever felt there's more to your own perception than you've been led to believe, you're in the right place. That feeling isn't an illusion. It's a signal. Subscribe now, because we're about to learn how to turn up the volume. Part 1. The air in here has a specific scent. It's the smell of old paper, the faint, sweet decay of wood pulp and lignin, mingled with the scent of leather from this chair and the ghost of pipe tobacco from its previous owner. It's the smell of stored history, of questions asked and answered, and questions that still hang in the air like dust motes in the lamplight. Outside my window, the suburbs are asleep. The manicured lawns and identical mailboxes are cloaked in a quiet darkness, punctuated only by the sterile, blue-white glare of a lone streetlight. A car passes, its headlights performing a slow, silent sweep across the wall, momentarily illuminating the spines of books. Gödel, Escher, Bach, a biography of Einstein, the hero with 1,000 faces, before plunging the room back into its comfortable, amber-hued solitude. This room is my sanctuary. It's my laboratory. It's where I come to dismantle the reality I'm handed every day and carefully, respectfully, examine the pieces. Have you ever truly done that? Have you ever had a moment where the world, your solid, predictable, Newtonian world, just glitches? I'm not talking about something you can dismiss. I'm talking about a moment of profound strangeness that lodges itself in your memory like a piece of shrapnel. I had one 6 years ago. I was in a coffee shop in a city I'd never visited before, waiting for a flight. I looked up as a woman walked in, and the world went silent. It wasn't just that she looked familiar. It was a full-body, gut-wrenching certainty that I knew her. I knew the scar above her left eyebrow. I knew the way she'd tuck her hair behind her ear. I knew the specific, sad but hopeful look in her eyes. The sense of recognition was so overwhelming, so absolute, it felt like a memory I had lived 1,000 times. But I had never seen her before in my life. The moment passed. She got her coffee and left. But the feeling of it, the vertigo, the chilling sense that my perception of time and memory was fundamentally flawed, never did. That was a big glitch. But there are smaller ones, too. We all have them. That sudden, urgent, inexplicable need to call your mother, only to find out she had just fallen and needed help. That dream about a specific, obscure place, a rusty bridge over a dry creek bed, only to stumble across that exact scene on a road trip a year later. That powerful, undeniable gut feeling, that cold knot in your stomach that screams, "Do not get in that car," a warning that feels less like a thought and more like a physical command from another version of yourself. We've developed a sophisticated cultural mechanism for dealing with these experiences. We have a whole vocabulary designed to neutralize their power. It was just a coincidence. That's just your intuition. What a lucky guess. We file them away, put them in a box labeled anomalous, and shove it into the attic of our minds so they don't disturb the tidy architecture of our logical, cause-and-effect world. It's a form of self-preservation. It's also a form of self-imposed blindness. For years, I was the master architect of my own rational reality. I could explain everything away. The call to my mother? Subconscious pattern recognition of her vocal tones from an earlier call. The dream. Cryptomnesia, a forgotten memory bubbling to the surface. The gut feeling. A primal fear response triggered by some subtle environmental cue. I had an answer for everything. But deep down, I knew my answers were thin. They were threadbare blankets trying to cover a gaping hole in my understanding of reality. A quiet, persistent voice beneath the deafening noise of my analytical mind kept whispering, "Look again. Look deeper. You're explaining away the signal." It's that whisper that led me here, to this desk, late at night, surrounded by the ghosts of old ideas. It's the voice that pushed me to look past the pop science headlines and into the strange, unsettling borderlands where mainstream physics begins to sound like mysticism. Where physicists talk about quantum entanglement, the spooky action at a distance that so unnerved Einstein, proving that two particles, once linked, can remain connected mirroring each other's state instantly, even if they're on opposite sides of the galaxy. If particles can do it, if the fundamental building blocks of our universe are non-local and interconnected, why would we, who are made of those very particles, be any different? What if what you think you've seen, what your eyes report and your brain processes, is just a broadcast from Channel 1, while 1,000 other channels are streaming information into you, just waiting for you to pick up the remote and change your frequency? Part 2. This is where the story makes a hard turn. It pivots from philosophical musing and personal anecdote into the cold, hard, documented realm of history. This piece of paper is a relic. A ghost from a secret war fought not with soldiers and bombs, but with consciousness itself. It's one of thousands of pages declassified in 1995 by President Clinton, pulling back the curtain on a series of programs run by the CIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, DIA, and even the Army, from the early 1970s to the mid-90s. The program had many names over the years: Innate, Gondola Wish, Grill Flame, and finally, the most famous one, Project STARGATE. The mission objective, stated in dry, bureaucratic language, was to investigate anomalous mental phenomena and assess their usefulness for military intelligence. What that really meant was they were trying to create a corps of psychic spies. It's easy to scoff. It sounds like a premise for a B-movie, a laughable delusion of the Cold War. But you have to understand the paranoia of that era. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a desperate, existential struggle. Both sides were terrified the other would gain some ultimate, insurmountable advantage. They were pouring billions into nuclear weapons, stealth technology, and surveillance satellites. In the midst of this, U.S. intelligence started picking up whispers that the Soviets were spending millions of rubles on psychotronic research. They were allegedly using psychics to track U.S. submarines, diagnose illnesses in their leaders, and even attempt to mentally influence foreign diplomats. The CIA, faced with the possibility of a psychic gap, couldn't afford to be left behind. They had to know if this was real. So, in their pragmatic, if you can't beat 'em join 'em fashion, they decided to find out for themselves. They didn't go to crystal ball gazers or tea-leaf readers. They went to two brilliant, respected laser physicists at the prestigious Stanford Research Institute, SRI, in California, Russell Targ and Hal Puthoff. These were not fringe mystics. These were men of science, steeped in the rigorous discipline of the scientific method. They were skeptical but open-minded. They designed experiments that were as watertight as they could make them. They used double-blind and even triple-blind protocols, where not only the subject, the viewer, and the experimenter were ignorant of the target, but sometimes even the analyst evaluating the results was kept in the dark until after their assessment was complete. They wanted to eliminate any possibility of fraud, sensory leakage, or lucky guessing. And then they started recruiting their viewers. They weren't looking for people who claimed to be psychic. In fact, they were often wary of them. They looked for ordinary, stable, intelligent people who showed a latent talent. People like Ingo Swann, a flamboyant and brilliant New York artist, Pat Price, a stern and grounded former police commissioner, and later Joe McMonigal, a decorated Army intelligence officer. These individuals, from a sealed, windowless, electronically shielded room at SRI, began to see. And what they saw changed everything. They weren't just getting vague impressions. They were producing actionable intelligence. They located a downed Soviet bomber in Africa. They described the internal layout of a secret Chinese nuclear facility. They sketched the design of a new, gigantic Soviet submarine weeks before it was launched. The data was so consistent, so accurate, and so far beyond the realm of chance that the intelligence community, despite its inherent skepticism, kept funding the program. For over 20 years, in secret, the U.S. government was operating on the confirmed premise that human consciousness is not confined to the human body. It was a truth too strange and too powerful to reveal to the public. Part 3. Reading the declassified transcripts, the dry reports, the statistical analyses, that's one thing. It's fascinating, intellectually stimulating. But it's still second-hand knowledge. It's someone else's story. The only way to truly understand what those men and women at SRI experienced is to try it yourself. To step into the laboratory of your own consciousness. My own first attempts were an exercise in failure and frustration. I approached it with the full force of my analytical, goal-oriented mind, and I crashed and burned spectacularly. I used a simple, standard protocol for beginners. I enlisted a friend in another state to be my beeper. Their job was to go to a website that generates random coordinates, pick a location anywhere in the world, and then hold that target in their mind for me. They wouldn't tell me anything about it. My job, sitting right here in this chair, was simply to quiet my mind, declare my intention to perceive my friend's target, and then describe whatever came into my awareness. It sounds simple. It's one of the hardest things I've ever tried to do. For the first 10, 15, 20 minutes, my mind was a roaring furnace of noise. It was my own internal critic, my ego, on full blast. This is stupid. You're just imagining things. You're going to be wrong and look like an idiot. Is it a building? Maybe it's the Eiffel Tower. That's a common target. No, too cliché. How about a mountain? Is it hot or cold? Man, I really feel like pizza. It was a relentless, chaotic monologue. My analytical mind, terrified of the unknown and desperate to be right, was trying to solve the problem like a math equation. It was throwing out hypotheses, searching my memory banks for images, trying to logic its way to an answer. This, I would later learn, is the absolute polar opposite of how remote viewing works. It's not about thinking. It's about ceasing to think. It's about becoming a passive receiver, not an active problem solver. I was ready to give up. I felt a flush of embarrassment, even though no one was watching. I sent my friend a text, "I'm getting nothing but my own thoughts." He simply replied, "Stop trying to get it. Just be with it. What does it feel like?" His words shifted something in me. I let go. I surrendered. I stopped trying to see the target and just listened. I focused on the silent, empty space between my frantic thoughts. I breathed. And then, something broke through the static. It wasn't a picture. It wasn't a movie in my head. It was a trickle of raw, disconnected sensory data. The first thing was a feeling in my body, a sense of vertigo, of being very high up and looking down. My stomach did a little flip. Then came a sound, a distinct whump whump whump, a rhythmic, airy beat. Then, a kinesthetic feeling of motion, of moving smoothly forward through the air. And finally, a distinct visual element, a pattern of intersecting diagonal lines, metallic and gray. I didn't try to assemble the pieces. I didn't try to make sense of it. I just reported the raw data, the signal, as I received it, feeling of being high up, looking down. Rhythmic whumping sound. Forward motion. Intersecting metal lines. I sketched the pattern of lines on my notepad. It felt abstract, fragmented, and probably completely wrong. I sent my notes to my friend. A minute later, my phone buzzed. It was a photograph. A point-of-view shot, taken from inside the cockpit of a helicopter, looking down through the front canopy. The rhythmic whump 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 was the sound of the rotor blades. The forward motion was the helicopter's flight. And the intersecting metal lines? They were the struts and window frames of the helicopter's cockpit, exactly as I had sketched them. A cold shock went through my body. It was a feeling of profound, terrifying, exhilarating wonder. My ego, my analytical mind, had been 100% wrong. It had offered me nothing. The quiet, subtle sensory signal, the one I had almost dismissed as meaningless noise, had been 100% right. For the first time, I had a direct, personal, undeniable experience of that hidden voice. It didn't speak in sentences or deliver finished pictures. It spoke in the fundamental language of raw experience. And in that moment, I knew, on a level beyond logic, that the world was infinitely stranger and more magical than I had ever allowed myself to believe. Part 4. So, my helicopter experience left me with a single, burning question that eclipsed everything else. How? What was the mechanism? What was the medium through which that information, the feeling of height, the sound of the rotors, the visual pattern of the struts, traveled from a random location on the globe and inserted itself into my consciousness, here in this quiet room? It's a question that threatens the very bedrock of our understanding of reality. In our classical Newtonian world, For information to get from point A to point B, something has to travel the distance between them. A photon, a sound wave, an electrical signal in a wire. But this was instantaneous. There was no travel time. It violated everything I thought I knew about physics and causality. This is the exact same intellectual crisis that the physicists at SRI, Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ, found themselves in. They were not paranormalists. They were men who lived and breathed the laws of the physical universe. And yet, day after day, their subjects were violating those laws. Their data was undeniable, but they had no theory to explain it. They were forced, by their own results, to look beyond the known world and into the strange, probabilistic, and deeply counterintuitive world of quantum mechanics. They began to explore ideas that were, at the time, on the bleeding edge of theoretical physics. One of the most compelling theories they investigated revolves around a concept called the zero-point field, ZPF. In modern physics, the ZPF is a recognized phenomenon. It is the lowest possible energy state that a physical system can possess. But zero is misleading. It's not an empty void. Classical physics imagines a vacuum as truly empty. No matter, no energy. Quantum mechanics, however, says something entirely different. It says that even in a perfect vacuum, at a temperature of absolute zero, there is still a roiling sea of energy, an invisible, energetic substrate composed of fluctuating electromagnetic fields and virtual particles popping in and out of existence. It is an ocean of pure potential that underlies every single point in the universe. Hal Puthoff himself has published peer-reviewed papers on the ZPF. This isn't science fiction. It's a foundational aspect of our best, most accurate model of the universe. The truly radical step was in how they hypothesized we might be interacting with it. They theorized that this zero-point field might not just be an energetic field, but an information field. That it acts as a kind of vast, holographic cosmic database. In a hologram, every tiny fragment contains the information of the whole image. If you break a holographic plate, you don't get a piece of the picture. You get the entire picture, just at a lower resolution. What if space-time itself is holographic? What if all the information about everything that has ever happened or is currently happening is unfolded, or stored, at every single point in this universal field? In this view, the information about the helicopter in my experiment wasn't over there. It was also, in some form, right here, in the fabric of space in this very room. This leads to a complete inversion of how we view consciousness and the brain. The conventional materialist model says the brain creates consciousness, like a generator burning fuel to produce electricity. But if this new model is correct, the brain doesn't create consciousness at all. The brain is a transceiver. It's a highly sophisticated antenna, and our consciousness is the signal it's tuning into. Our five senses are designed to tune that antenna, with exquisite precision, to the frequency of our immediate physical environment. This desk, this lamp, this body. It's a survival mechanism. But the antenna has a much wider bandwidth. Remote viewing, then, is the learned skill of consciously retuning your antenna, of filtering out the overwhelming local channel of your five senses, to pick up a different channel being broadcast by the universal field. You're not sending out a psychic probe. You're changing the frequency on your receiver. After seeing this phenomenon demonstrated successfully thousands of times, under rigorous protocols, for over 2 decades, Russell Targ, the physicist who co-founded the program, made a statement that is both simple and profoundly challenging. He said, "The evidence for psychic abilities is so overwhelming that if you don't believe it, it's because you don't want to." When I first heard that, my skeptical mind bristled. It sounds like an arrogant dismissal of critical thinking. But I've come to understand it differently. He's not asking for blind faith. He's pointing out the psychological reality of cognitive dissonance. The evidence is so strong, and its implications are so reality-shattering, that for many people, it's easier to dismiss the evidence without looking at it than it is to look at it and have their entire worldview fall apart. It is a description of a psychological defense mechanism, not an attack on intellectual rigor. He's saying that after a certain point, disbelief is no longer a scientific position. It's an emotional one. It's a choice to remain in the comfortable, known world, even in the face of overwhelming data to the contrary. The signal is there, but we are conditioned to believe it's just noise. And that is the entire art form of this discipline. Learning to tell the difference. Part 5. learning to distinguish the signal from the noise. That's it. That's the entire game. It's the core practice, the fundamental discipline that separates a true remote viewer from a daydreamer. And it's a process that forces you into a state of radical self-awareness. The noise is the relentless, cacophonous monologue of your own mind. It's your ego, your memory, your analytical intellect. It's the part of you that wants to be right, that wants to impress, that fears being wrong. It's the part that leaps to conclusions. It takes a flicker of red and screams, "It's a fire truck!" It takes a feeling of coolness and smoothness and declares, "It's a pane of glass." These declarations, these specific nouns, are what experienced viewers call AOL, or analytical overlay. It's the ego rushing in to build a story, to connect the dots and present a finished, logical picture. And it is, almost without exception, wrong. The ego is a storyteller, not a perceiver. The signal, on the other hand, is quiet. It's subtle, fleeting, and often profoundly weird. It doesn't speak in finished sentences or deliver neatly labeled objects. It speaks in the language of raw, precognitive experience. It delivers sensory fragments. Red, cool, smooth, metallic taste. The feeling of being enclosed. A high-pitched whining sound. The signal is the universe whispering the basic components of the target. The noise is your own mind shouting what it thinks those components add up to. The great challenge, and the great liberation, is learning to honor the whisper and ignore the shout. It requires a kind of mental humility. You have to be willing to write down impressions that make no sense. You have to be willing to sound like a mad poet, jotting down disconnected adjectives and strange sensations. There's a legendary story about Pat Price, the formidable ex-police commissioner, that illustrates this perfectly. In one of his sessions at SRI, he was given a set of coordinates and began to describe his impressions. He described a large concrete building and a feeling of scientific importance. This was standard. But then he got a very strange, very specific impression. He said he was perceiving a giant, custom-built typewriter. The analysts were baffled. A giant typewriter? It made no sense. It was the kind of detail that a skeptic would immediately seize upon as proof that this was all just imagination. But Price was a master at reporting the signal, no matter how strange. He didn't try to edit or interpret it. He just reported what he got. It was only later, when the team was debriefed on the target, that they understood. The target had been a top-secret NSA listening station. And inside that station was a brand-new, one-of-a-kind supercomputer, the most advanced in the world at the time, that was being used to decode encrypted messages. The primary interface for this machine? A massive, custom-built keyboard console. To his consciousness, tapping into the function and form of the target, the most accurate description was a giant typewriter. His analytical mind could never have guessed that. Only the pure signal could deliver something so specific and so unexpectedly correct. This reveals how deep our conditioning runs. We are trained from birth to be analytical, to assemble fragments into wholes, to find the pattern and name it. It's how we function in the world. But that very function, so useful in our daily lives, creates a powerful field of noise that completely obscures the subtle signal of our deeper perception. Our own intellect becomes the cage. To learn remote viewing is to learn, for a little while, how to pick the lock on that cage, to let your awareness expand beyond the confines of your own logical mind and touch the world directly, without an interpreter. It's a process of unlearning, of becoming wonderfully, receptively ignorant again. If this is starting to break down some of your own conditioning, if you feel a flicker of recognition for the subtle signal deep inside you, it's because that signal is your native language. You're just starting to remember it. Share this video with someone else who you feel is ready to listen. Excellent. I will now continue with the same level of depth and detail for the next sections of the script. Here is Part 6. Part 6. When you first encounter this topic, it's natural to get fixated on its origins, on the high-stakes world of espionage and military secrets. The idea of psychic spies, of a psi race between superpowers, is undeniably compelling. It's a narrative straight out of a Cold War thriller. We imagine shadowy figures in hidden bunkers, mentally peering into enemy missile silos or tracking covert operatives. And while that was the initial driver, the reason for the funding and the secrecy, to believe that espionage is the ultimate purpose of remote viewing is like believing the only use for the discovery of fire was to forge weapons. It's a profound, tragic limitation of a tool that has the potential to redefine what it means to be human. Once you accept the core principle that human consciousness can act as a non-local receiver of information, the implications bloom outwards, touching every single field of human endeavor. Think about creativity. What is a creative breakthrough, really? We have this romantic notion of the lone genius, the artist or inventor who, through sheer force of will and intellect, conjures a masterpiece out of thin air. But talk to these creators, and you often hear a different story. You hear them speak of ideas coming to them in a dream. You hear composers talk about hearing a fully formed symphony in their mind. You hear scientists describe seeing the solution to a complex problem in a sudden flash of insight, a eureka moment that feels less like a deduction and more like a gift. Are they creating something from nothing? Or are they, in their own way, performing a type of remote viewing? Are they tuning their consciousness to a specific channel in the universal field and downloading a solution, an image, or a melody that, in some sense, already exists in the realm of potential? Imagine a writer struggling with a character's motivation. Instead of trying to logically deduce what the character would do, they could use a viewing protocol. They could set the intention to perceive the optimal narrative path for that character. They might receive impressions of a feeling of betrayal, the color of deep crimson, the smell of rain on hot pavement. And from those raw, sensory seeds, a new, authentic, and powerful scene could emerge, one that their conscious mind would never have constructed. Imagine an engineer trying to solve a design flaw. Instead of just running computer simulations, they could view the system in operation, perceiving the point of stress not as a number on a screen, but as a feeling of shearing or a high-pitched, dissonant sound. This isn't about replacing logic and skill. It's about augmenting them. It's about adding a powerful, intuitive, right-brain tool to our predominantly analytical, left-brain toolkit. The applications extend far beyond the arts and sciences. It's been used, with documented success, in archaeology. Viewers have been given the geographic coordinates of a barren piece of land and have accurately described the layout of buried structures, the materials they were made from, and the purpose they served, guiding archaeologists to significant finds that would have otherwise been missed. It's been used in corporate settings, where CEOs have employed viewers to get a sense of future market trends or the potential success of a new product launch. But for most of us, for you and me, the most profound and immediate application is in navigating the labyrinth of our own lives. We all face moments of profound uncertainty. Should I take this job? Should I move to that city? Is this the right partner for me? We make lists of pros and cons. We ask our friends for advice. We torment ourselves with endless what-if scenarios. This is the analytical mind running in circles, trying to predict the future based on the incomplete data of the past. Remote viewing offers a different path. It allows you to view the feeling tone of a potential future. You can set the intention. Perceive the gestalt of my reality 1 year from now if I accept this job. You quiet your mind and you listen. You might not get a detailed report, but you might get an overwhelming feeling of constriction, drab gray colors, and a sense of boredom. Or you might perceive a feeling of expansion, bright, warm light, and a sense of joyful challenge. It's not fortune-telling. It is, I believe, accessing the deeper intelligence of your own consciousness, which can perceive the holistic pattern of a situation in a way your linear, analytical mind simply cannot. It's a compass for the soul, helping you navigate not towards what you think you want, but towards what will genuinely lead to your growth and fulfillment. Part 7. The more you explore this, the more you realize that learning remote viewing isn't about acquiring a new skill, like learning to play the piano or speak a new language. It's not an addition. It's a subtraction. It's a process of unlearning, of shedding the layers of conditioning and limitation that have been piled on top of you since the day you were born. It's about chipping away at the marble of your skepticism and self-doubt to reveal the statue that was already waiting inside. The goal isn't to become a superhero or a psychic. The goal is to become a fully realized, fully integrated human being, operating with your complete toolkit of perception, both physical and non-local. The very act of practicing this discipline is a profound form of mindfulness. In our daily lives, we are almost completely unaware of our own minds. Our thoughts run on an endless, unexamined loop. We are slaves to our own internal monologue, buffeted by our emotions, hijacked by our anxieties. But to do this work, you must become an observer of your own consciousness. You are forced to sit quietly and watch the chaotic theater of your mind. You learn to recognize the signature feeling of your ego trying to take control. You learn to identify the subtle taste of an authentic signal versus the loud, brassy taste of your own imagination. You become an intimate connoisseur of your own inner states. This self-awareness, this learned ability to step back and witness your own mind without judgment, is the foundational gift of this practice. The accurate, psychic data is almost a secondary benefit. As this self-awareness grows, something remarkable begins to happen. Your intuition, that vague gut feeling we started with, begins to sharpen and clarify. It's no longer a fuzzy, unreliable hunch. It becomes a clear, precise instrument. You start to make better decisions in your life, seemingly by chance. You think of someone, and they call. You feel a sudden urge to take a different route home, only to learn later that you avoided a major traffic accident. You meet a new person and have an instant, deep knowing, not a judgment, but a perception, of their character. This isn't magic. You're simply learning to listen to the data stream that was always there. The synchronicities in your life increase, not because the universe is suddenly paying more attention to you, but because you are finally paying attention to the universe. This journey of unlocking our own potential is not a new idea. It's a central theme in many schools of thought, from ancient spiritual traditions to modern personal development. Dr. Joe Dispenza, a neuroscientist who has dedicated his life to studying how people can create profound changes in their lives and bodies, speaks constantly about the importance of getting beyond the analytical mind. He teaches that our thoughts and feelings broadcast an electromagnetic signature, and that to change our life, we must change that signal. He says, the only way we can change our lives is to change our energy, to change the electromagnetic field we are constantly broadcasting. And that means we have to become more aware of our unconscious thoughts, behaviors, and emotions. This is precisely what the discipline of remote viewing trains you to do. It is a practical, repeatable, protocol-driven method for becoming aware of your unconscious processes, for quieting the analytical mind, and for changing your state of being from one of reception to the mundane world to one of reception to the quantum field of infinite potential. It is, in the most literal sense, a training for creating a new self, and therefore, a new reality. It is the key to unlocking the power that resides not in some distant mystical realm, but in the quiet, empty space between your thoughts. Part 8. It's impossible to discuss a tool of this magnitude without confronting its shadow. With any great power comes an equally great responsibility, and the capacity to perceive information beyond the normal boundaries of space and time is a power of immense proportions. The very genesis of the American program was a reaction to the perceived threat of its misuse by an enemy. The immediate, reflexive impulse of a fearful, competitive society is to ask, how can we use this to gain an advantage? How can we use this to see what our rivals are doing, to know their secrets, to predict their moves? The entire history of this phenomenon in the modern world is entangled with the ethics of espionage, of power, of control. As this knowledge moves out from the shadows of classified programs and into the public domain, we, as individuals, are forced to grapple with these same ethical questions on a personal level. If you develop this ability, what are its moral and ethical boundaries? Is it right to view your boss's intentions before a big meeting? Is it acceptable to try and perceive the private life of a romantic interest or a neighbor? Where does curiosity end and a profound violation of privacy begin? These are not trivial questions. They cut to the very core of how we choose to relate to one another. The potential for misuse is obvious and unsettling. It represents the temptation to become a ghost in the machine, an invisible observer in the private lives of others, a power that no human ego is equipped to handle with integrity. However, something fascinating emerges when you speak to experienced, long-term viewers and study the ethos that has developed within the serious remote viewing community. There seems to be an inherent, self-regulating principle built into the universal field itself. The consensus is that intent is paramount. It's not just a philosophical preference. It seems to be a functional law of the system. When a viewing is undertaken with a high-quality intent, a motivation rooted in love, compassion, service, a genuine desire to help or to understand the nature of reality. The signal from the field is clear, strong, and coherent. The results can be miraculous, leading to healings, profound insights, and the discovery of information that benefits all. Conversely, when a viewing is attempted from a place of low-quality intent, from the ego's desire to spy, to manipulate, to gain a selfish advantage, to feed jealousy or greed, the signal itself appears to become corrupted. The viewer's own mental noise, their fear, their anger, their grasping ego, overwhelms the subtle signal from the field. Their own personal biases, judgments, and desires act as a powerful filter, distorting whatever information comes through until it is a grotesque reflection of their own inner state. It's as if the universal database has a kind of firewall, and the password is pure intent. You cannot, it seems, use a tool of fundamental unity and interconnectedness to successfully serve an agenda of separation and selfishness. The very act contaminates the experiment. This leads to a powerful realization. The highest and best use of this extraordinary ability is not to look at other people. It is to look into the great, shared questions of our time. To view our collective challenges, like climate change or social division, with the intention of perceiving the root causes and the most compassionate solutions. It's to better understand our true history, our place in the cosmos, and the very nature of consciousness itself. And perhaps most importantly, the most ethical application of remote viewing is radical self-awareness. It's turning that powerful, perceptive lens back upon yourself. It's using the tool to view your own blind spots, your limiting beliefs, the unconscious, inherited patterns that are running your life and holding you back from your own potential. The real challenge is not, can I see what's inside that secret government building? The real challenge is, can I see what's inside my own heart? Can I perceive the hidden architecture of my own egoic mind? Using this tool to clean your own lens, to purify your own intent, that is the great, noble, and ethical work. It's the path from being a mere psychic to becoming a true seer. Part 9. Once you have had one single, clear, undeniable experience of this, just one moment where you perceive something you could not possibly have known, where the signal cuts through the noise with absolute clarity, your world breaks. It breaks beautifully and irrevocably. The old paradigm, the worldview that most of us were raised with, simply cannot survive the evidence of your own direct experience. That paradigm, the one that underpins our entire modern civilization, is materialism. It's the belief that the physical, material world is the primary reality. It says that the universe is a giant, dead, mechanical clockwork system made of inert matter, and that consciousness is a strange, accidental byproduct of complex neural wiring in our brains. It says you are a meat puppet, a biological machine, living a brief, isolated existence on a random rock in a meaningless void. In the moment of a successful viewing, that entire structure of belief collapses. It doesn't just crack, it shatters into dust. And what rises from the ashes is a worldview that is infinitely more vast, more hopeful, and, I believe, more true. It's a paradigm shift of monumental proportions. You realize, in a way that is visceral and absolute, that you are not a physical body that has a consciousness. You are a field of consciousness, a non-local awareness, that is temporarily focused into and experiencing reality through a physical body. The body is the instrument. You are the musician. The body is the antenna. You are the signal it receives and transmits. This isn't just an intellectual change. It's a full-body recalibration. The universe ceases to be a cold, dead, indifferent place. It reveals itself to be a living, intelligent, and profoundly interconnected system. You are not a stranger here, an alien accident. You are a vital, integral, and necessary part of this cosmic intelligence. The deep, gnawing sense of existential loneliness and separation, the quiet ache that haunts modern life, begins to dissolve. It's replaced by a profound and comforting sense of belonging, of being fundamentally at home in the universe. You realize the mystics and poets were right all along. The world truly is alive, shimmering with a hidden intelligence. This shift changes how you walk through your day. The world becomes more magical. It becomes a place of mystery and wonder once again, as it was when you were a child. You start to notice the synchronicities, the meaningful coincidences, the subtle rhymes and rhythms of reality that were always there, but which you were too disconnected to perceive. You stop feeling like a helpless victim of random circumstance and start to understand, humbly but surely, that you are a conscious participant in the continuous act of creation. Your thoughts, your intentions, your state of being, they are not private, internal events. They are broadcasts into the field, and they have an effect. You matter. This is the great paradigm shift. It's the move from seeing yourself as a noun, a fixed, separate object, i.e. me locked in a fragile body, to seeing yourself as a verb. You are a process of perceiving, process of knowing, a process of becoming. Your identity expands. It's no longer limited to the boundaries of your skin. It's a flowing, dynamic dance with the entire cosmos. You stop asking, what can I get from the universe? And you start asking a much more beautiful question. What does the universe want to express, create, and experience through me? It's a shift from a life of getting to a life of serving, not out of a sense of martyr duty, but out of a joyful recognition that to serve the whole is to serve the deepest part of yourself. Part 10. So, as we sit here in the quiet of this room, you might be asking, how do I begin? Where do I start? You don't need to petition the government to declassify more files. You don't need access to a multi-million-dollar laboratory. The only laboratory you need is your own consciousness. The only instrument you need is your own attention. You can start tonight. You can start right now. Start with a sense of playful curiosity, not grim determination. The ego is grim and determined. The soul is light and playful. Ask a friend or a family member, anywhere in the world, to simply select a photograph from a news website and look at it for a minute. That's it. Your task, sitting in a quiet room with your eyes closed, is not to guess what it is. Let go completely of the need to be right. The need to be right is the ego's trap, and it will deafen you to the signal. Your only task is to be a curious antenna, a receptive instrument. Ask yourself, what am I sensing? Not what am I thinking, but what am I sensing? Get a pen and a piece of paper and just start sketching. Are there lines? Are they curved or straight? Thick or thin? What colors are you sensing? Not pictures of colors, but the raw impression of blue or yellow. What about the other senses? Is there a sound, a taste, a smell, a temperature? Is the feeling of the target expansive or enclosed? Is it natural or man-made? Report these raw, disconnected fragments without judgment, without trying to assemble them into a coherent story. Let the page be a mess of strange adjectives, simple sketches, and weird sensations. Just be the court reporter for your own awareness. Then, when you're done, have your friend send you the picture. Don't be discouraged if you're wrong. Just look for the correlations. Maybe you sensed red and metallic, and the target was a red car. Maybe you sensed water and green, and the target was a lake surrounded by trees. Celebrate these small hits. That is the beginning of learning to recognize the signal. The ultimate realization, the epiphany that this entire journey leads to, is this: remote viewing is not a strange paranormal power that only a few gifted or chosen people possess. That is a myth, a lie that keeps us small. It is your human birthright. It is a dormant sense, a faculty of consciousness that has been systematically ignored, ridiculed, and conditioned out of us by a society that fears what it cannot measure and control. It is a muscle that has atrophied from a lifetime of disuse. But it is still there. It has always been there. That hidden voice, that gut feeling, that flash of intuition. It has been speaking to you, whispering to you, trying to guide you your entire life. All that is required is for you to finally turn your attention inward and choose to listen. You possess an extraordinary, innate capacity to see, to feel, and to know far, far more than you have ever been allowed to imagine. You are an infinite consciousness exploring reality through a finite lens. The greatest adventure is learning to adjust the focus. Your mind is an aperture to the universe. Don't let anyone convince you it's just a keyhole. If this journey resonated with your soul, it's because your soul is calling you to remember. Subscribe. Stay close. The greatest discovery is not out there in the cosmos, but within you, waiting to be seen.